Hi, how are you? We are here today with our Facebook Live, and my name is Miss Irene.
And I'm Tammy Jones.
And we are super excited to present a new book to you today. So it is called Firekeeper's Daughter, and if you look at the front of the novel, I think it's amazing. So that's the first thing you'll notice when you go to read this book is the artwork. If you want to speak to the artwork a little bit, Tammy?
Absolutely. What I love about this is, first of all, it has a lot of the native icons on it. You have the raven, you got the bear, you got the butterfly, but more importantly, it's got her both sides. It represents both sides of her. She has to walk this really fine line. She's half white, she's half native, and so because of that, she has she's portrayed as having like dark skin on one side and light skin on the other. But she's also involved in who is she? She is she's Donis Fontaine, and she's our protagonist in the novel. Our protagonist, and she's been growing up in Sault Ste. Marie, and she loves science, as you can see here. It's got the science lab type looking thing, but it's also got a darker side because this is also how you can create some pretty bad drugs, and so therefore all of that is represented here. And she's Firekeeper's daughter. So in the native story of the Firekeeper's daughter, it says that the Firekeeper's daughter is responsible for rising the sun. So the sun rises every morning because she sings, and so right there, it's got her with the sunrise. And so that's kind of, it's an amazing book cover. It really is art.
So when you read the story, the substance of the story, and you touched on it, is basically we have an 18-year-old girl who's fresh out of high school. She's getting ready to go to community college because she's chosen, because of her elderly grandmother and some other tragedies that have happened at home, to stay home and go to the community college local with her best friend. And she basically is, again, half white, half native, and she struggles between those two worlds. In the very beginning, they called her a scandal, and they called her, what was the other word they said?
She starts up the thing, it's the perfect beginning for a book. So it says that she started first as a secret, and then as a scandal. And so, and that's how she's lived her whole life. Her mother and her father were not ever supposed to be together. She comes from a very high society family in Sault Ste. Marie. And then she goes, and her mother is 16 years old and gets pregnant by the hockey jock, who is also native. And
Kristen, thank you for joining us. And you love the book. We did too. We absolutely. So, I mean, on a very fundamental level, if I was going to start off with this book, she was amazing. This is her debut. First off, it's a debut novel for her, which is amazing. And for a debut novel, I give it 5 stars.
Oh, absolutely. I loved every bit of this. There is just so many layers on this book, that and the history, and you get to know tradition, and she just does such an excellent job of explaining, her culture.
And she very respectfully walks both sides, the white and the Native American side, so that you feel both cultures, and you feel respect and the benefits of both cultures, and what it brings to Donis, because they both helped raise her. So we're going to start with our first question. So Donis is our protagonist. She's the most important person in the book. It pretty much is her. And it is, how does Donis view her Firekeeper side versus her Fontaine side?
Well, she's, as I said before, she has to walk this tightrope. She has 2 completely separate ways of acting whenever she's with one or the other. She's allowed to be... she has to be responsible with the Fontaine side, and she's being more allowed to be herself, maybe, or take her culture, and just be able to work on that a little bit. I think that she kind of sees herself more on the Fontaine side because she grew up with her mom, and so she's kind of been in that. So
I would say, although you said she's more on the Fontaine side, I think she has a huge curiosity in this book about the Firekeeper side. So I think that although she was on the Fontaine side, she was still very close to her father, who was the Firekeeper. That's what the last name Firekeeper comes from, is her father. And he was actually very active in her life, which is very bizarre, because it was a scandal, and he married another woman and had another child that they both ended up being 7 years old. So they were the same age. So they both had kids. And so it was very interesting that, you know, she still had that relationship with the Firekeeper side. And her mom kind of insisted on it.
Her mom definitely, and fought against her family to be able to have that, you know, that connection with her daughter.
And as it goes through the book, it says, does that change over the course of the novel? I think in some ways it does. I think she becomes to have stronger roots towards her Firekeeper side.
She started the book off as, you know, being a Fontaine. Her grandmother on the Fontaine side had a big plan for her. She was going to go off to a big college and, you know, become a medical student. And she was going to make something of herself. And her uncle was also a science teacher, so she was all ready for that. That's what she was ready to do. But then she lost so much of her family. There at the very beginning of the book, her uncle has died of a drug overdose. And her grandmother she has a stroke,
and she's basically an invalid in a nursing home where her mother takes care of her.
So she came from this really strong Fontaine side, and then all of a sudden, all of her major influences on that side are gone.
Absolutely.
So now it's just her and her mother.
In the book, we talked a little bit about the scandal of the fact that the father actually went off and got drunk and had another baby. So what do you, and that other baby turns out to be Levi, her brother. What do you think about Levi's sibling relationship with Donis?
Well, it's really strong. I mean, when you consider that, you know, technically they shouldn't even, you know, be allowed to be together, and they're only 3 months apart. That's part of the scandal part of it. You know, how is it that, you know, you've got a brother that's 3 months younger than you are? And so, but considering all of that, they have a very strong relationship, and they're both very, you know, actively watching out for one another.
Kristen, you're right. There was a huge spiritual component,
yes,
absolutely, on the Firekeeper side, and I think also on the other side, because when she goes to Catholic Mass, she's very familiar with that as well. So she had that spiritual and religious connection at that level as well on the Fontaine side. So I agree. The other thing with Levi is she has stars in her eyes for her brother. He is perfect. He can do no wrong. He is.
He's like her father. You know, she lost her father, so the father's no longer, you know, with them. But, you know, the brother now has become a hockey star, and he is a leader of people, and he's very, very well liked. And so, you know.
And so as the book develops, you'll start to see cracks in that relationship, and how does that change? And that is an awesome thing that the author does, and how she brings that about through the plot. There are many elders in Donis's life who gave her guidance and share wisdom. Who was your favorite?
So I think probably Minnie Mustang, or, you know, I like Granny June too. I mean, it was so interesting because it was hard to have a favorite. Right. They all had their own personalities. They didn't try to change. They were exactly who they were meant to be. You know,
I love that the fact that she had, basically she would go with Lily in the very beginning to take care of Granny June, and that's how she really got to know the elders. And then when her best friend, unfortunately, and it's in the very beginning of the book, so it's not a spoiler, she is killed by her, tragically, basically, by her boyfriend, who is at the time high on meth. Right. And she continues to have this very strong relationship with her grandmother, which is Granny June, afterwards. And she actually gives her the Jeep.
Yeah, right. Gives her the Jeep, and she is like this wise and wonderful, funny lady. I mean, she's just constantly, you know, like being something who could connect with young people.
And it was funny because she's very quirky. One of my other favorites that we had was TJ's. Oh, did you like See Me Nimki?
Yeah, because she was like the traditional. She knew all about the, you know, medicine. She was practicing traditional medicine. I thought that she was really a neat person, and she was the one that was really adhering towards the tradition. So she wanted to be able to, you know, keep the tradition alive.
And Donis really tried to do that as well. During this investigation, there was a point where they wanted her, the FBI, to try to find where these mushrooms that they felt were being added to the meth was making it more powerful. And she really wasn't allowed to do anything with traditional medicine because it was part of that for a year of grieving for her best friend. And so she was still going out there using the scientific method and hunting for these. And one of the people that she went hunting with, who was one of my favorite, was actually TJ's grandfather, and his name, I can't recall it.
It's John Zeke Wade.
That's right, John Zeke Wade, and he was hysterical. He had a very cranky attitude. He was bossing her around. He was telling her what to do. But it was like, you're just another one of my daughters, and I'm going to treat you like one of the gang. And he was one of the few that I felt really treated her as a native. He didn't have any qualms about her. He made her feel like family. By making her feel like family, he pretty much was a crotchety old man with her, but that's how he treated everybody.
And that's a good point, because, you know, not all the elders liked her.
No, they didn't.
Some of them thought, you know, well, you know, you're half white. You don't even need to be part of this. You know, you're illegitimate. You know, we don't want you almost. So not all of them really approved of them, but.
If you could have a novel about one of them, and Kristen, if you're still on there, we'd love to know your answer. If you could have a novel about one of the elders, what one would you pick?
I would pick Singing Millie,
because of the medicine.
Fascinated about that tradition, exactly.
About the medicine.
And the medicine as well.
See, I was going with Teddy, and then you corrected me because you told me again she's not an elder because she wouldn't be old enough. But I know
it's
it's
60.
So. But she is somebody who I would have loved to have a book on, was the aunt. I think she's seen so much and done so much and been through so much. I think she was amazing. And so maybe Grandma Pearl from that side of the family.
She was very nurturing. She was like the nice grandma that everybody wishes they could have. You know, where they would always be, you know, caring, and they would always have a hug waiting for you. Kind of.
But she had a lot of history. She had the girls that were. That basically at one point they were taking children off of the reservations and they were putting them in boarding schools. And it was really a horrible thing, and they take them away from their parents. And she experienced that. And
punished them if they spoke their own language, and basically tried to eradicate, you know.
And they would cut their hair, which was very much a symbol in the native side of them. That was very important, and that would be one of the first things they would do to them when they went to boarding school. So it was very sad. So I think Grandma Pearl would have some of those stories and some of that history of what happened and how they overcame it and how it got better for them.
She was strong.
What do you think of Jamie as a character? Do you like the way Jamie and Donis's relationship unfolds?
Well, you know, you're reading a young adult book, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, of course, you got to have the tall, dark, and handsome. You got to have the dreamy
with
guy.
the scar.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the bad boy.
Yes.
You know, he's somewhere there. He's done something. You know.
Yep.
You know.
Something adventurous because he's got a scar on his face.
He has mystery, everything, and all the girls have noticed him.
Yes.
And he's smart.
Yes.
You know, he's really smart.
He speaks French. She speaks Italian.
He knows Sun Tzu. He's very. He wants to be very polite with the elders. Just everything. He's smart. You know, and here's Donis. She's been running around with a bunch of hockey jobs.
Yes.
You know, and all of a sudden here's this guy, and you know,
he treats her different.
He treats her differently, and treats her intelligent. You know, like he sees how intelligent she is, and he appreciates that.
So it turns out in the very beginning of the book that Jamie is not who he thinks he is, and she begins to notice this.
There are cracks in the facade, and pretty soon it's like.
At one point, they're at one of the tribal festivals, and there's fireworks that go off, and he jumps on her and takes her down like it was a gunshot.
Right, like I'm going to protect you. So he's very overprotective.
So when you're looking at those kind of things, you begin to look, and then when Lily was killed, he went over there and he acted like almost an EMT. He was checking for a pulse. He was doing all the things that somebody who would have had training would have done.
Yeah, it seemed very obvious that he had some type of past, that would allow him to be able to do that.
So the development, you said, Kristen, you said you appreciated the relationship development. I did too. And then when he turned FBI, and it turns out he was FBI, Donis was really upset because she felt betrayed. She didn't trust him anymore. And then she agreed basically for the benefit of her culture and her friends, because it was her friends that were dying of these meth overdoses, that she would be part of the FBI investigation on the reservation to try to find out who was making the meth, who was dealing the meth. And part of that was playing a facade with Jamie that they were going to be dating.
Right. Well, and she has no trust of that because he wasn't upfront with her to begin with. And it turns out that her uncle was part of the investigation, and he ended up, dying.
Right. He was murdered.
Mysteriously,
Later on.
Yeah, so they thought it was
overdose at the time.
Yeah, they thought it was potent, but it still remains a mystery as to whether or not, it was, something worse than that or not at that point. So yeah, I mean, so she has a lot of reason not to trust, authority.
So that we're not going to get into the end of the book, so we want you to read it.
Yes.
But at the end of the book, we find Donis in a different place, pursuing a different future than when she first attended. Why do you think she decided to shift her focus from basically, in the beginning, she wanted to pursue medicine. She wanted to be a doctor. And she wanted to go away to school to like a big Ivy League school. That was her plan.
She wanted to get away. I mean, she literally was, raised in a scandal. So she wanted to be able to have a fresh start and, have that where she could just go somewhere where everybody didn't know who she was.
Absolutely.
Just be like, that. But at the same time, I mean, she really went through a lot of things happened to her throughout this book. Amazing things. She, first of all, she had to do this. So she had to do this mushroom experimentation where she was trying to figure out why the drugs had this new hallucinogenic effect. And so she, like her uncle, she found out her uncle had been doing the same studies on it. And she found out she really liked to do it.
Right. She enjoyed the scientific method. She enjoyed the questioning. She enjoyed that part of the puzzle.
Right.
She also grew as herself. We talked a little bit about Donis and Jamie's relationship, and towards the end, the relationship focus in the book goes from them to her and her growth through the book.
Well, I think she realizes through her whole life that she has been kind of doing this chameleon kind of a thing, trying to please everybody. And she realized that most of the people that she'd been trying to please all this time really let her down in this book. I mean, there were so many people that she thought that she knew that she was completely, dumbfounded to find out that, it wasn't the way it appeared to be. And that, so she said, well, from now on, I think, I'm just going to do what's right for me.
And she, this book has a lot of strong passages in it, thoughts that are just amazing when you want to ponder on them. And so my recommendation is really take this book and read it. You're going, this is a YA book. Why would I take the time? Okay, there's some YA slang in here. You're going to see it. You're going to hear it. It's going to have a YA overtone. But this book, I would recommend to any reader. I would put this as one of my top YA books I've ever read.
Right. They said it was for 14 and over. But, things happen to her. This is not a nice, bad things happen to her.
So this is, I would recommend this for somebody that is more in high school, a little older, to read because of some of the tones in the book. But overall, I found the book phenomenal. I would recommend it. If you are interested in reading the book and then being in our discussion next week, so on next Tuesday, we will be meeting via Zoom. If you want to be part of our virtual book club discussion, we have a really great time, and we're going to discuss The Firekeeper's Daughter in more emphasis, and we'll give you an opportunity to talk with us. It's going to be 2 o'clock on the 27th. Please just go to collierlibrary.org to register under the events, or you can email me personally, irene.johnson@colliercountyfl.gov. Either way, I'll make sure you're on the list and you get the link to the Zoom so that Tammy and I can have fun talking to you about it.
I have so much enjoyed this book. I've enjoyed discussing it with you. I think this is fantastic. So
thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate your feedback. And Kristen, thank you for your awesome feedback.